Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a very special look inside what our restoration teams are up to in the Gulf. My name is Erin Spencer. I am the communications manager for restoration at the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, and I am going to be your host today. We're going to get to talk to our friends currently out at sea on a ship called the RV Point Sur. It's a 135-foot vessel owned by the University of Southern Mississippi and operated by the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, also known as LUMCON. Today, the ship is about 100 miles off of the Louisiana coast, and the site that they're sitting on is about 1,400 meters deep, or about 4,600 feet deep. But throughout, just a couple of reminders before we get through to them, throughout today's program, please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll get those over to our folks on board. We also want to get your feedback on today's program, so just putting that in mind. We do have a short survey at the end that you can fill out to let us know what you liked and what you want to see from other programs in the future. We'll send that link in the chat right now, but also we will send it again at the end of the program so you can fill it out then. So, okay, in just a few minutes, we will connect live to our friends at sea. But before we dive into that, I just want to take a few minutes and go over some of the background of this work. We've got a great little video to show you here. As you travel deeper into the ocean, there is less sunlight that is able to penetrate the water. Just past the recreational scuba diving limits, you reach something called the mesophotic zone, which also means middle light. Despite the low levels of sunlight here, this zone is home to colorful corals, sponges, fish and invertebrates. And then beyond this twilight zone, there is no sunlight at all, and the temperatures get much colder and it's under a lot of pressure. But there's still vibrant habitats here, full of life at these depths, hundreds to thousands of feet below the surface. These mesophotic and deep benthic, or seafloor ecosystems, are found worldwide, including in the Gulf. And you can see some of the footage we have here is all taken from our expeditions in the Gulf. However, in 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill dealt a heavy blow to Gulf communities on land and at sea. 11 people lost their lives, and natural resources, wildlife, and habitats across the northern Gulf were severely impacted. More than 770 square miles of deep sea habitat were injured by the spill. But as a result, collaborative restoration projects are currently underway to help us understand and restore these seafloor ecosystems. The projects are developing new and improved maps of the seafloor to locate these important coral communities, learning more about the species that live in these habitats, the environmental conditions that they thrive in, and how they might be connected across the Gulf, determining the best methods to encourage deep sea coral growth and reproduction to help restore the impacted coral species and the important habitats that they create, and then also reducing the threats that these ecosystems face, like we're here, removing marine debris. And then also connecting the habitats and restoration work to the public and natural resource managers through programs like the one that you're joining today. This restoration work is made possible by the Deepwater Horizon Natural Resource Damage Assessment Open Ocean Trustees, and is led by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Department of Interior, alongside many partners, including a large number of academic institutions and non-governmental organizations. And there is a QR code that you can scan here to learn more, and we will also add some more links in the chat. So enough about the background. I think it's time for us to go at sea and see what our friends are up to. So let's go to the ship. Oh, and it looks like it's a gorgeous day today out on the Gulf.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you? Thank you so much for joining us. If you could go ahead and just introduce yourselves for everyone joining us today.
Yeah, of course. My name is Fanny Girard. I am an assistant professor at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I'm also a partner on the MDBC project, and I'm leading the coral imaging efforts here in the Gulf.
Hello, my name is Jack. I'm her grad student. I work in her lab. I've been kind of brought onto this project as well, doing a lot of work with the same coral imagery that she does.
So we have a lot that we want to talk about today, but before we get started, can you tell us, does it feel as good as it looks right now? Are the conditions really as nice as they look?
It's really nice.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's pretty warm in the sun.
But not too warm
Yeah.
compared to what we usually get when we work here in the summer. So perfect
Yeah.
conditions.
So yeah,
Okay,
great
amazing.
day. Beautiful day.
One of the joys of fieldwork, of course, you can never predict what the weather is going to be until you get out there. Can you tell us a little bit about where you are on the ship right now?
So we're currently standing in front of the ROV control room. So this is where the pilots currently are, because we are currently descending for another dive at this site. And we're happy to show you the inside of the van as well.
Yeah, take us in. So this is the remotely operated vehicle control room. Looks nice and cozy.
It is cooler.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So you said we're currently descending for a dive right now. And I know that all of you have been out at sea for a couple days now, and there's a few really specific objectives we're trying to accomplish on this particular expedition. And one of those is really looking at high resolution imaging. And so could you talk us through what is high resolution imaging and how does it help us understand deep sea corals?
So what we do is that we have these different sites where we've been going since 2011, actually. So all this work started after the Deepwater Horizon oil spill that was part of the damage assessment process. And we are now contributing to the MDBC restoration activities as well by collecting valuable information, using these images of individual colonies that we've been tracking over many years to look at their health, connect their health to environmental conditions. So that's the deep sea lander and instrumentation that is being deployed also on the seafloor to measure these environmental conditions, looking at growth rates as well as any organisms that are associated with these corals. So we need this really high resolution imagery to be able to make all these biological measurements on those animals from the images.
Wow, you can see here how much you can zoom in and see all those super fine details. And so, you said you've been working on this since 2011. We've been getting these incredible images. What have we learned about the relationship with corals and other deep sea organisms from some of these images?
So there's a lot of animals that live on these corals. So one of the work that I did actually a few years ago was looking at this interaction between those brittle stars that live on the corals and the coral themselves, because these are species-specific interactions. So you always find the same species of brittle star. You can see one on the image right now on the screen, associated with the same species of corals. And we think that this is kind of a win-win relationship where the brittle star is using the coral as a way to get better access to food, which is suspended in the water column. So that's what those animals are eating. And the brittle stars seem to be also cleaning the corals, removing any particles that deposit on that coral so that the coral remains healthier. And there's just a lot of other animals, and we are right now, and Jack is working on one of these projects right now to try to characterize what are the communities of organisms that live on these corals. Do they differ between sites? Do they differ depending on coral size? There's just a lot of questions that needs to be answered, and all these things we can do from this very valuable data set.
That's amazing. And we're seeing some images on the screen now. Were these taken on this expedition?
Those were all from yesterday.
All from yesterday. That is amazing. And so we're getting to see these coral associates, or those animals that live on the coral. And it's really cool to know that you just saw those yesterday, and they're out there as we speak. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the technology that goes into this? So when you're operating the cameras, obviously you're on the surface, you're sitting in the control room right now. What are you looking for when you're watching that ROV footage, and how do you find that kind of perfect scientific photo?
So we're really trying to optimize the quality of the photo. So when we usually dive with an ROV, the ROV has multiple cameras, including a 4K cameras, and you can take frame grabs from that. And when you take a frame grab, you still reduce the quality of the image. So when we started this project, we decided to instead use a digital still camera. And so that camera is handheld by the manipulator arm of the ROV. And then that's a 24 megapixel camera, so really high resolution camera. So we can precisely position it with the arm in front of the corals. And then we can control remotely that camera from the ROV van, taking the photos that we need to replicate. And I do have, talking about that, this book here with all the images that we want to replicate. So if you open it and you look, you can see how the corals are supposed to look like. So we're trying to redo exactly that same photo so that we can compare changes over time. So we have these, which we've been calling mugshots for corals. And then basically the photo ID, each coral has its own name as well. So we really can follow this individual over time. And we have hundreds of individual corals that we've been following at different sites.
Wow, that is so incredible. So it requires a lot of precision then to like go back to those exact sites and try to line up the exact photo. That I imagine that it's a pretty difficult for all of those stars to align. It sounds like there's also a lot of communication between your team, the two of you, and ROV pilots, and I imagine the ship as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like finding something on the deep sea floor, 1,000 meters deep, is very difficult. So the way that we do that is that, of course, we have spatial coordinates, but there's always a little bit of uncertainty for the exact location. So what we did is that years ago, we deployed these physical markers, which is just a float attached to a dive weight and reflective tape. So that helps us, once we're on the seafloor, to find the marker, and then from the marker, we find the corals that we've been imaging. So that's, I would say, probably the most difficult thing, is to actually find again all these same coral colonies from that marker, because that's not always an easy task to do. And again, if any of you are scuba divers, just orienting yourself underwater is pretty difficult sometimes as well.
And we can see on the screen here what it looks like when this camera is really up close and personal with these corals. And I think, we actually have some footage from yesterday when you were on one of the sites taking some of the coral images. Can we whirl that up as well?
Yes.
Because right now I think they're doing different objectives on this dive. So, here we go.
Is that the one that we just looked at?
According to survey, that's where we need to go.
Okay. So right now we're looking for a physical marker that we deployed in 2016. So it's a dive weight attached to a rope and a floater with reflective tape, which allows us to find the site where we need to image corals. And then once we find this marker, we can use that digital still camera that the ROV is currently holding in its manipulator to take images of corals. And these are time series of images that we've been taking since 2011 at this site since 2016. So the way that it works is that if you look here on the screen, this is the HD camera, so that's the video camera that the ROV is using and what is recorded. And then in addition to these, we have this digital still camera in a pressure housing that the ROV is holding with its manipulator. And so with that, if you look at that lower screen here, this is the live view from that digital still camera, and this is what we're using to get these really high resolution images of the coral. So this camera is 24 megapixels, so we get really good quality images, which allows us to measure the health state of these corals, do they look healthy or not, measure growth rates as well by comparing images that are taken over different years, and also looking at any organisms that live on these corals. So now, so we image these corals here on that same rock towards that side, there should be another group of corals. We control it remotely. I have here a mouse that allows me to control the camera from here. The camera is connected via a tether to the ROV, and then the ROV itself is connected to the ship. And so I can see the live view here. Once I have a shot that I like, I just take a photo of what I need, and that's being just recorded and saved on the computer.
That is so cool to see the live action from yesterday of what that feels like when you're in the room. But I also feel like I have to ask, because it's something that stood out a little bit. You had a very specific scientific piece of equipment with you that you were pointing at the screen. Can you show us what you were using there?
That's our very high-tech pointer. Just a stick so that we can point to the screen to show the pilots where we want them to go or which corals we're interested in. This, we don't want it to damage the screen, obviously, by touching it by accident. So we added this little foam ball here, which also has a face. You can see happy face, Halloween face. So yeah, that is what we use to point at things in the ROV van. We actually made that years ago, but apparently the pilots like it because they kept it.
That's one of the things that I love also about this work, specifically in the field, is that we have so much high-tech equipment, and you're using these high-tech cameras and the ROVs. And then sometimes troubleshooting an issue is actually quite simple and comes with really simple solutions amidst all that great technology. But I also, we're seeing this view of you taking the photos in the field, but really that's only part of the whole picture when it comes to doing this work. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you actually analyze these photos after the fact? What are the sort of things that you're looking for and documenting in that process?
For sure. I mean, I can take you guys to my laptop right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the main things, along with a couple other things, but the two main things that we're looking for, and we do when we process these images after, is we look for health status data. And here you can see an annotated coral for all the different health statuses. So red would be an unhealthy part of the coral, green would be a healthy part of the coral, and then this yellow means it's colonized by a hydroid. And so for each image that we take down, we note throughout the years how their health status is changing, kind of looking to see how restoration efforts are going and how the corals are recovering from back when the oil spill happened. And so another thing we keep track of and we process the images for is we look at the growth rate of the coral. So here you can see it's a little bit harder to see, but in this light green, we have all the old coral, or like the coral that hasn't grown. And then if we zoom in here, I'm trying to see, yeah, you can see this dark green here represents coral growth. So you can see that these corals grow very slowly, and this is usually year-to-year data. Sometimes there's gaps, but generally it's every year. We are analyzing coral growth year to year. So here you're seeing that this coral has grown only slightly, and this is a pretty big coral. So it is also really important to take note that these corals aren't growing super fast. So in terms of restoration and keeping these corals healthy, if they are impacted by something, say like way back when with the oil spill, it's going to take them a long time to recover, which is why it's important that we, keep going and checking on these corals even to this day, even though everything happened back in 2011.
Wow. And it's also so interesting to see such a fine scale look at those individual corals. Now, when you're doing that analysis, are you annotating each one of those images by hand, and then referencing the old images?
Yes, we are. Everything is done by hand, which is pretty time consuming. And also you need another human observer to do it as well to eliminate bias. So 2 people at least have to annotate the same coral for growth and health. That way you can get accurate data and use that for like statistical analysis and stuff like that.
So you're working on a machine learning model now.
That is true. Another one of the projects I'm working on is to kind of help with this tedious process. And I'm using a machine learning model to hopefully do the health status like automatically without having a human annotator necessary. So that I think will be a great help to this project and for future coral studies going forward for looking at different health statuses, and it'll speed that process up monumentally.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think you really touched on something that's important too. Obviously, all of this work is directly applied to the restoration of these mesophotic and deep Gulf corals, but the methods that you're working on can apply to a lot of other areas as well, not just in the Gulf. I think that's so exciting. But now you said you're working on your machine learning model. How long does it take you right now to annotate one of those photos?
I'd say the growths take longer than the health status. I remember when I first started doing it, it took a long time, but you get better with, with, I don't know, your mouse dexterity, I don't know what you want to call it, but you get faster. And also at identifying the different health statuses, you know, at the start, it's like, is that unhealthy? Is that a hydroid? And that can kind of be confusing. But once you kind of get it down, you can do a fair amount of corals in a day. And it also, some of the corals can be like really small, and those ones take like no time at all. When you're annotating, you see a tiny coral, you like sigh of relief. It's like, oh, like, thank God, that one's only going to take 5 minutes. But some of the big corals, to do growth on them, can take like hours for one coral, because you have to count each polyp basically to see if the coral has grown, because sometimes the angles are different, or the camera wasn't exactly in the same spot. So you can't necessarily judge it based on like a visual eye. You can't be like, oh, I think that grew bigger, and then mark it. So you basically have to count each polyp on the coral to see if like new polyps have grown. And that's how you would associate growth with that branch.
Wow. And so in the course of one of your ROV dives where you're doing imaging, how many individual corals might you be able to get in one ROV dive?
It depends on the sites. So to give you an idea, the one that we did yesterday, we probably
Here.
imaged about 60 corals.
We have a little list here. I don't know.
Yes, of the corals we imaged.
And this is all the
All
corals
your corals.
we went to, yeah.
Wow.
And
That's
we
pretty
hit
incredible.
all of those yesterday, yeah.
Yeah, and I think
that's sorry. It's like also
No, please
depends
go.
a lot. Like the ROV pilots currently are really good at that, so we save a lot of time. And yesterday, I was talking about that earlier. We were planning originally to image those corals at this site over 2 different dives, and we actually finished everything in 1 dive.
Yeah. So shout out to the boys over here.
Yeah, that goes back to how collaborative all this work is and how much communication is required. And of course, you're doing it under some potentially unpredictable conditions at those depths. And so what are, you've touched a little bit on some of the challenges, right? Trying to find some of these same locations. What are some of the other challenges of actually executing the field work?
Well, a big challenge, as I mentioned, is finding those sites back on the seafloor. Another challenge, as you said, is also the environmental conditions. Sometimes we go down there and the current will be extremely strong, right? And so it makes it very difficult to image, because if we cannot stabilize the vehicle, if the currents are too strong, we're going to get blurry images, for instance. Or a few times, actually, these specific sites where we are right now, we try to go there. Last year, we tried in 2023, and the surface currents were so strong that we couldn't dive at all. So we have now a gap in our data set, right, of 2 years, but that is not because we didn't try, but it's just because sometimes the weather and the ocean doesn't let us get there.
Yeah, the classic challenges of fieldwork, and also even exacerbated by the fact that you need such fine scale and stability for those images.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget, I have plenty more questions, but don't forget that if you're watching this, please make sure to put your questions in the chat so we can be sure to share that with Jack and Finney. But let me ask you both, what are some of the things that you have seen, Finney, you've been doing this for many years, and Jack, you've joined the project, that have surprised you when you've been down at those depths?
I think for me, what surprised me always, like I've been working on this project for so long, is that how little these animals change over time. I mean, now we've been tracking them for 15 years. And these corals, they look exactly the same. It never happens that we get there and the coral has grown a lot, or, its associates or the organism living on it have changed, so we don't recognize it. They look exactly the same almost as they did in 2011, which for me is really striking. And it's also a good reminder that in the deep ocean, everything is very slow. And so that's something that we need to take into account in terms of, the ability of these animals to recover from impact, but also for restoration efforts, right? That it's not like, oh, you're going to, restore that area and immediately it's going to be like it was before, but it will take some time before we reach a level where the organisms are thriving and your ecosystem is entirely restored. So these are all things that we need to take into account.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you had an answer to that question.
Let's see.
What surprised you?
Something that, being, I guess, fresh to the project, I think one thing that surprised me, similar to that, was the brittle star interaction. It's such a cool, like, I don't know, would you call it symbiosis?
Yeah.
A cool symbiosis between these corals and the brittle stars that you see on them. I don't know, it's such a unique thing. You don't really, wouldn't really think about it like a brittle star helping a coral, but in terms of something that was really stuck out to me, that symbiosis and that like epifaunal, I guess the animal living on it, it just struck me in a cool way. And then, so that actually kind of leads into the project that I'm working on with Epifaunal Associates. So the organisms that live on the coral, it's really cool that that interaction stuck out to me. And then now I get to work on the greater community that's living on those corals.
That's awesome. And that actually ties directly into one of the questions.
Yeah, what heading do we have right now?
Which is, which species of brittle stars did you find? And which other animals do you find that are associated with those corals? With a special shout out to, are there any benthic unicorns?
Could you say that one more time? Did you hear?
So it's a 2-part question, 3-part question actually. Which species of brittle stars did you find? And then the second part is, which other animals do you find that are associated with those corals? And then there's a special question at the end of, are any of those associated animals benthic ctenophores?
Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer
So
that?
the species name, I believe, is Astroschema
Clavigerum.
I preparing for this, I knew this somehow was going to come up, and I still messed up the name. But yes, so Fanny, would you pronounce it?
Asteroschema clavigerum is that species of brittle star. It's always that one species associated with that one coral. But we're looking at different coral species in the area as well, not just the yellow coral, which is called Paramaricia. And other species of coral do have different species of brittle star. There is at least 5 or 6 different species of brittle stars that have been documented at this site. And then there is a lot of other animals. We see sort of like worms living on those polychaete worms, a lot of little crustaceans, shrimps living on those corals, anemones. We really see tons of different organisms. We haven't found any benthic ctenophores on these corals in the Gulf. I have seen them on corals in other parts of the world, but not on the corals that we've been looking at in the Gulf.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And also on the screen, we have some stunning images of some of the associates on these corals.
That's beautiful image.
And these were all taken as part of these expeditions, these restoration expeditions, which is really stunning. All right. I don't see any other questions for now, so I'll jump into, really kind of tying this back to this bigger question about how we're restoring the Gulf, these important habitats in the Gulf. And I know you've touched on this a little bit, but can you tell us explicitly, how do these images that you're collecting really help us restore these deep corals?
With this image, we're really collecting a baseline on how these corals are supposed to look like. So getting information on their health and their growth, and very importantly, also linking that to environmental conditions. So this is a large collaborative project, right? We have other people on board that are deploying these instruments on the seafloor to measure environmental conditions. I understand this link between health and environment is really important. For instance, if we want to identify a suitable habitat where we might want to restore corals or where we want to do anything in those areas, just to know, okay, what is a healthy community? How does it look like? The whole part about the associates as well is trying to get a better understanding of the role of corals as a habitat for other species, because we know that corals are what we call ecosystem engineers, meaning that they provide basically a structural habitat that a lot of other animals use. And in the deep ocean, this creates some kind of a hotspot of biodiversity as well. And so we're trying to get a better understanding of like the general health of this entire community, including the corals and all the animals that live with them.
That's amazing. And I think it's also important to note that not only are all of these images that you're taking really important in this science of how you're tracking this over time, but of course, we use these images to help spread awareness about the availability, like where that these corals even exist in the Gulf. A lot of people don't even understand that we have these spectacular mesophotic and deep corals. And so these photos are also bringing the deep sea to the public, including in this presentation that we have today. And so when people see these images, what do you hope they will take away about these deep corals and the importance of the work that you're doing after they see the images you've taken?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's extremely important because I realize that a lot of people, everyone is familiar with tropical shallow water coral. Any person you talk to, they will know what these are, what a coral reef are. But the majority of people have no idea that deep sea corals exist, and even less idea that these corals are as beautiful as the one that we find in the shallow waters. And so I think these images and video are extremely powerful because they make people care, right? And if people care, then they are most likely to be supportive of any protection or conservation effort, which they wouldn't be if they're not aware that something exists at all.
Absolutely. I think very well said. And also we've got some more just incredible images and great views of some of these associates, and really grateful that you're out there doing this work so that we can enjoy these wonderful images. Now we're getting kind of towards the end of the program, but I want to shift gears right at the end, and not to put you on the spot, Jack, but I understand that this is, you're newer to this project and newer to this sort of at-sea fieldwork. So can you give us some of your fresh perspectives of what it's like to be out at sea, and how are you enjoying the project?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's really fun to be out at sea. I mean, the first night was kind of rough, but I slept through it, so it was good there. And yeah, I'm super excited, being like an undergrad and like wanting to get into the deep sea, and being like the coolest thing ever would to be like doing an ROV dive, and like actually live view of the bottom of the ocean and stuff. And so actually getting there and doing it, it's like, wow, like this is so awesome. I'm actually, achieving something I set out to do, and it's super fun and very rewarding. And obviously I've been working on the project over a year now. I think I came on in August or right around there working with Fanny. So it has been really rewarding to start, doing my own research and kind of taking the project in different directions, as well as, helping out with all the annotating and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, no. And we're looking.
Oh, that is me helping to launch. Yeah. Yeah. Look at me.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing to point out is it truly is an all hands on deck situation when everyone is at sea, and sometimes you wear multiple hats and have multiple jobs. But no, that's so fantastic, and thank you for your thoughts on that as well. We again are so grateful for you joining us today and sharing more about the work that you're doing. And I also do want to give a special shout out, and you mentioned this as well, but that there's an ROV dive happening behind you as we speak, which I think is also really, really amazing and goes to show everyone that there's a lot of things happening on board at any given time. And you never know. Oh, and huge shout out. Thank you so much to our ROV pilots there, hard at work, not to put them on the spot. But huge applause. And on that note, I don't see any other remaining comments. So I know you all have a lot more work to do. We will let you go, but just want to say thank you again so much. This was really wonderful and a rare opportunity to see what this work is like in the field, and wishing you all a really fantastic rest of the expedition.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah, safe travels.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right. Well, thank you again to Jack and Fanny for joining us, and all the crew of the Point Sur, and wishing them all a really safe and successful expedition. That is the end of our program for today, but just a couple of remaining things. If you like today's event, we have a lot of additional live streams coming up throughout the month that are covering different topics, including a couple of very special spooky live streams coming later on in October. So we're going to paste some links in the chat where you can find all the dates for those and save the date and join us again. Also, if you want to learn more about these projects or see articles about the work that we have done, and we even also have a really fun interactive story map where you can see where these expeditions have been all throughout the Northern Gulf over the last few years. We are going to paste a link in the chat where you can find a lot of those resources as well. And also, just a reminder, we would love to get your feedback about today's event. Please tell us what you enjoyed, what you would like to see next time, other topics that you might want to see in the future. We are open to any and all suggestions. But with that, I will say thank you all so much for joining, and we really appreciate you supporting this restoration work in the Gulf.